So welcome, our brilliant, beloved colleague, Michelle. We so appreciate your consistent leadership and your consistent solidarity. And as always at SETC, we begin all things by giving thanks to our creator, by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands around. We acknowledge all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So, Michelle, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work?
Okay, well, thank you, Victor, for that beautiful introduction and for your incredible leadership and support. You are in every corner that I get the pleasure of connecting into. And so this is such a treat to spend this time with you. So I am Michelle Baldwin. I am calling in from the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lune, Pequot peoples, which is now called London, Ontario. And I have lived here since I was 8 years old. I have a beautiful family here, some afar, but some close by. And I've had the pleasure of working in the nonprofit sector since I was 15 years old. A dear family friend connected me into an organization that works with children and youth around children's rehabilitation. And I was there on a summer job cleaning, and this amazing volunteer manager said, "You have been interacting with the kids in the hallways in beautiful ways. You should volunteer with us." And that has set me on a path into this incredible space of social impact for a very long time. I won't tell you how many years. And so today I get to work with Community Foundations of Canada as a senior advisor transformation. And the language of transformation is really, a radical change from one thing to another. And I have this incredible team there, but we do work really in a cross-sector way in this work. And touch into different places where we know that the role of philanthropy and shifting power and mindsets is really, really important. And so we've been on a journey and listening to people like yourself and others around, what is that? How do we, authentically shift power? How do we shift mindsets? And in philanthropy, it's, a beautiful space, but it is built on colonization, on some harm and oppression that has been in the past and continues. And so some of what we're trying to unlock is really about understanding the past, understanding kind of that present role that we have, and really trying to encourage folks to think into a 7-generation mindset about the future. So that's a wee bit about me and the lucky, fortunate role that I get to play at Community Foundations of Canada.
That's a beautiful, beautiful context and background. And yeah, I did not know about those early beginnings. That's remarkable. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate your leadership as always. So my next question, what's inspiring you right now? What has you curious, or what's keeping you up at nights?
Well, I'd say what has me curious is and inspired is working with folks who really are curious and have that willingness and readiness for change. As we've been kind of navigating all these multiple crises that are upon us, I sense that we're in like one of those moments in history where people will look back and think, whoa, there's just so many layers going on. And it feels like there are people who have a real willingness to create that shift. And I think in the past, I've tried to work with like everybody and kind of almost maybe try to convince people that there's a new way forward. And I think I've recognized in the last little bit that that there's something about working with the curious and willing, making sure that you're thinking about who isn't at the table, but not trying to like will everybody there at the same time. So I think I'm curious about how you do that and how you stay in a place of equity and inclusion in that moment, but at the same time recognize that you have to go deep in some ways to create movements and build that kind of ripple effect, and then others will kind of layer into that. as we think about the role of philanthropy and, how do we shift those mindsets, I think people really do need to see like tangible examples about that, how that's happening. So in some of the work we cross over around transforming capital, hearing these like incredible stories of those who are doing those incredible moments of shifting capital and power, but not just only in our own context of Canada, but on a global level. So I believe that yeah, the curiosity is in really expanding like who we're learning from, and making sure that we're getting those connections so that we create that ripple effect. What's keeping me up at night is I don't think we're not going at the pace of change that is required for this moment. When we talk about equity, when we talk about climate, homelessness, just all those multiple layers of crises. And so I feel like in some ways there's been almost a snapback since COVID, and instead of like an acceleration. And so and some days I can feel it in myself that you're trying to like just take those deep breaths and ground yourself. But then at the same time, you're feeling like this almost like urgency that you're trying to create. So my hope is that that people do find the time for the self-care, the deep breaths, but that we also recognize that we need to be making big, bold changes. We can't just be tweaking at the edges, in those, like, I guess the 3-horizon model, the kind of optimization or like kind of tweaking at the edges is one piece of the work that needs to happen, but we need to be doing that really bold, big change that will propel us forward to, much more equitable, sustainable, and vibrant and lovable communities. I would add in, you always bring the community love into spaces, and I think we really need to amplify that.
Ashe, I couldn't agree more. And thank you so much for such a beautiful and comprehensive answer to all 3 of those questions. A lot of times folks struggle with that one or they'll only answer one component of it. And I really appreciate you just all that diligence. I greatly appreciate you. And I believe that everything's about relational infrastructure. And if we can't bring love and joy to our work, even if it's activism, even if it's advocacy, then what's the point? It's like what is it worth without love? So definitely I couldn't agree more. And I really appreciate your kind words and warm sentiments. It means a lot. So my next question is, what challenges and barriers are you facing in your work? And what are some of the approaches you and your colleagues are taking to overcome some of these challenges and barriers?
I think probably where I see some stuckness for both myself and maybe the movement is just trying to make sure that we don't get caught up in like I think saying that language is the barrier is sometimes a way to say that it's a way to kind of exit from kind of getting into the deepness of what we're trying to do. And so I find myself, just constantly trying to shift and change the way that I'm talking about things to make it more accessible, which is necessary. But then also, how do you not kind of shrink that work and stay like rooted in the audaciousness of what is needed in this moment? And so I think for me, just trying to find that, like kind of find that place in that tension has been tricky. And then within Community Foundations of Canada, we do work that's really kind of going back, I guess, to that idea of the love of a nudge and a hug. And I think it's like, how are you kind of going between nudges and hugging when you're bringing people to new ideas, and to really try to bring like a lens around systems, and the complexity of what those systems really mean. And because, within the Community Foundation movement, they're doing incredible work at the community level around like pretty much every system is being touched somewhere. How can you do that? Like, how do you do that work with understanding all the layers and interconnectivity of that? I think requires a lot of reflection and space for generative thought and conversation at the board level, staff level, community level. And most importantly, like, how are we centering community, those most impacted in those conversations, and taking the lead from them? And I think we're still within all movements, maybe not quite centering the community, I shouldn't say maybe not. We are not centering the communities most impacted in what we're doing to date. And so I think there's some opportunities there. So one example would be, that I've been like on this wild journey that I never believed I would be in, of trying to explore emerging technologies like Web3, blockchain, and AI. And that's a space where, like, sometimes people, the language is a barrier. So like, how do you bring people into it? And I think what we're recognizing is, let's not even talk about the technology. Let's talk about the problems we're trying to solve, figure out how we're trying to solve them, layer in the technology, and then people get to see it rather than like hearing about it only. So I think that's a bit of a flip, because I think I felt like I was out there talking about it, trying to get people excited about it. And I think there's an opportunity to really try to like demonstrate and show people what's possible. And in particular, in the one project that we're exploring at with Super Benefit, Equality Fund, Reimagine Institute, All In for Sport, and Ontario Trillium Foundation, it's called Reimagining Power. And we're actually trying to do like these experiments documented in a playbook and show people what's possible.
That's incredible. Congrats. And yes, I've been at some of those tables, so I know the work that's happening. And once again, I just applaud your leadership, visionary leadership, and your consistent diligence around this work. Because a lot of times it's hard to stay motivated, but it's a lot easier to stay consistent when you know the why is so important. So once again, I give thanks for all that you do for so many. My next question is, do you have a set of key priorities right now in your work you'd like to share?
Sure. So we've been in a deep dive, trying to figure out with many in community around where should we be focusing our attention. And I'll speak to, more of the transformational work at CFC. So we've come up with like these 3 areas of focus and priority that we believe are, like a Venn diagram that will get us to the, transforming capital and philanthropy in ways that will create better futures for all. And those 3 are learning and networks. So, that relational infrastructure of building those trusted relationships and social connection among people, so that they're in peer-to-peer relationships that can really leverage that collective wisdom that moves us to action. So there's a few tables: the Transition Innovation Group, which SETC has been so beautifully community weaving at, the Transform Capital Peer Group, and all of these are open. So if anybody's listening and they want to be part of anything they hear about, of course, this work needs to be inclusive and ready for those who are interested. So learning and networks. The second area is innovations and experimentation, and testing out some of these kind of newer spaces, and emerging technologies is one of the space. And so we're just bringing on 2 emerging technology fellows focused on AI, Web3, and blockchain. We're going to do a deeper dive in the next months around AI and philanthropy. And if I was trying to sum up kind of the thread of that, is there's a lot happening around how we use it, but not as much on how we design it and who is getting to design it. And so I've heard, many people speak to this, and I think, Community Foundations of Canada can play, a role in terms of also exploring what that means for community foundations and philanthropy. And then the third area is storytelling and narrative shifting. And, how do you kind of, for shifting those mindsets, spark imagination, share stories, case studies. And what we've chosen to do is use an intergenerational lens and have storytelling fellows who are bringing, areas and really co-creating what those stories are that they think are transformation. So it could be around transforming capital, climate, some of the emerging technologies. And so each of them, we have 4 right now, and we've had 3 in the past who have done extraordinary work. And so, I believe in the power of storytelling, and narrative shifting as another lever for that big change that big audacious change that we're looking for.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you. So this is a perfect segue to my next question. How do you feel about the future of philanthropy? Are you optimistic? Are you hopeful? Are you pessimistic? How are you feeling?
Well, anybody that knows me knows that I tend to sit in the space of hopefulness, and I'd say sometimes people have to remind me of the reality. And I think within philanthropy, I am super hopeful about the future. And when I imagine it, it looks very different than the way it looks now. And so, if I use the example of some of the new governance models that are, a lot more decentralized, and I think not only philanthropy, but organizations in general, just really flipping the way that we do the work is going to be necessary to center the community. And so I think philanthropy will likely look quite different in the future. What that looks like, I think, needs to be still determined, but there's some really incredible work happening where, for example, people talking about, like, what if you did a call to philanthropy to support your work rather than, Jack Ablaze from Hogan's Alley Society posed that question yesterday with our Transform Capital peer group. And I think it's a really interesting, way of flipping the power dynamics, for example, or, just how are we making things way more centered and participatory with the communities making decisions, and what does that look like? So I think there's radical things that I probably haven't even been able to tap into that are quite possible. So overall, I feel super hopeful for philanthropy. I think we have some big work to do to really understand our role in just doing more listening and centering reconciliation and equity, like in ways that are not happening as of yet.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. So what does success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues? My second last question.
I love it. Well, I think within Community Foundations of Canada, my witnessing has been that it's really trying to build that sense of deep connection in learning, and as we come into these spaces of difficult conversations and new models of organizational governance, and just how we operate, creating that sense of connectivity of learning, and rather than reinventing everything, how are we trying to model that? And community philanthropy on its own isn't enough to be creating a movement. And so how are we really connecting into that cross-sector approach? And so that's, whenever we host something in the transformation work, it's a blend of folks, because I think you really do have to have different people engaged in that work from different corners. I won't get into all of them, but it really needs to be diverse in terms of who, the sector, because I don't think you'll learn just from being with people in like organizations. So success would look like, a very, it would look like philanthropy is equitable. It's centering those most impacted. It has climate at the heart of its agenda. So that blend, I guess, of humanity and planet, and just holding both of those in our hearts and minds as near and dear to the kind of change that we're trying to make.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. So my last question, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action for our listeners and our viewers?
I thought this question, yeah, it's like, what is my individual piece and then what's an organizational piece? So if I start with the individual piece, how, do you build that intentional time in for reflection, imagination, rethinking kind of the ways of being in philanthropy and community, and then how do we do that with an abundance mindset instead of just what is missing, but really tapping into what is possible? And so I find that for me, I can get on there's just so many incredible things happening, which is heartening. But I think that like really trying to do deeper, more focused work and prioritized work will help. Will help to get there. So that's kind of on individual. I think on the kind of organizational level, my call to action would be to, the emerging technology space is the deep unknown and can be super scary. And we need the mindsets of those in the social impact world to help shape this, because right now, like you kind of have this inbound of all what's kind of icky or not quite sitting right about it. But that's partly because it's easy sometimes to follow the media stories or look at what's missing, but there is so much that is possible in philanthropy, in these spaces. And so my call to action would be to think about, like, how is this happening? Instead of it happening to us, it's happening with us. And as we do that, how are we really reimagining who is part of shaping that? And if we have some role of privilege and influence, to make sure that we're broadening that out to others. And then amongst all of this, because it can feel like so much, how do you integrate some of that collective imagination and play? I spend a lot of time with my granddaughter. She thinks I'm a lot of fun, and I'm a lot of fun with adults too. So I think, if somebody is, at something and they're like, hey, let's get up and dance, or let's, try this poetry or whatever. I think how do you kind of get into these spaces that you may never have done before, and kind of tap into that inner child?
Michelle, thank you so much. You have no idea how much I appreciate the relationship that we've cultivated and stewarded over the past few years. Not only that, just the authenticity you bring to this work, the deep introspection, the grace, mercy, compassion, and once again, visionary leadership and solidarity. I'm honored to call you my colleague, my friend, and I really appreciate all that you do for so many, fam. So thank you. And as always at SETC, we close the way we began, by giving thanks to our creator, by acknowledging and giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We acknowledge all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Thank you so much, Michelle. I so appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.